What started as routine late-night promotion turned into television's most explosive confrontation when Ryan Gosling walked into Jimmy Kimmel's calculated ambush, leading to a career-defining clash that ended with Hollywood's golden boy storming off set in disgust. The Tonight Show with Jimmy Kimmel was running its usual opening monologue when something felt different in the studio. The audience sensed an unusual tension crackling through the air as Kimmel delivered his jokes with more bite than usual, his eyes gleaming with an anticipation that seasoned talk show watchers recognized as trouble brewing. Ryan Gosling had agreed to appear on the show to promote his latest indie film, a passion project that had taken him 3 years to develop and produce. What he didn't know was that Kimmel had spent the afternoon digging through tabloid reports and industry gossip, preparing an arsenal of loaded questions designed to embarrass rather than entertain. As Gosling walked onto the stage, his usual, composed demeanor intact, the audience erupted in applause. He waved graciously, settling into the guest chair with the easy confidence of someone who had done this dance hundreds of times before. The first few minutes proceeded normally, light banter about his film, some charming anecdotes about working with his co-stars, the kind of promotional fluff that keeps Hollywood's publicity machine humming. But Kimmel was waiting for his moment. "So Ryan," Kimmel began, his voice taking on a sharper edge as he leaned forward in his chair, "there's been some interesting talk around town about your methods on set." The host's smile remained fixed, but his eyes had turned predatory. "Some crew members have been sharing stories about your behavior during those intimate scenes with your co-star." The studio audience fell silent. Gosling's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flicker of confusion crossing his features. "I'm sorry, what are you referring to exactly?" Kimmel pulled out a printed article, waving it theatrically. "Well, according to several unnamed sources, you were quite demanding about how those scenes were shot. Some might say controlling." The implication hung heavy in the air, and Gosling's jaw tightened as he realized where this was heading. "Jimmy, I think there might be some misunderstanding here," Gosling replied carefully, his voice maintaining its calm tone despite the obvious ambush. "Every intimate scene in the film was choreographed with an intimacy coordinator present, and my co-star was involved in every decision about how those moments were portrayed." But Kimmel wasn't backing down. In fact, he seemed energized by Gosling's discomfort. "That's interesting, because that's not what we're hearing from the set. Word is you had some very specific requirements about camera angles and takes. Multiple takes, from what I understand." The audience began to murmur uncomfortably. This wasn't the playful ribbing they expected from late-night television. This felt invasive, accusatory. Gosling's publicist, watching from the wings, was frantically trying to catch the attention of the show's producers. But Kimmel was in full attack mode now. "Look, Jimmy," Gosling said, his voice dropping to a more serious register. "I don't know where you're getting this information, but it's completely false. I've always been professional on every set I've worked on, and I resent the implication that—" "Oh, I'm not implying anything," Kimmel interrupted with mock innocence. "I'm just sharing what people are saying. You know how Hollywood loves to talk." He leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the moment. "But since we're on the subject, there have been other whispers, too, about your relationships with some of your leading ladies over the years." The color drained from Gosling's face. This had crossed every line of professional conduct, and everyone in the studio knew it. The band members looked uncomfortable. The audience was growing restless, and even Kimmel's usual yes-men were shifting nervously in their seats. "That's enough," Gosling said quietly, but his voice carried a steel that made everyone pay attention. "I came here to talk about my film, not to be subjected to whatever this is." Kimmel laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the suddenly tense studio. "Oh, come on, Ryan. You can't handle a little heat? This is just friendly conversation between colleagues." But there was nothing friendly about the malicious gleam in Kimmel's eyes, and Gosling could see exactly what kind of game was being played. The host had orchestrated this ambush perfectly, timing it for maximum impact and minimum escape routes. The cameras were rolling, the audience was watching, and social media was already buzzing with clips of the confrontation. "Friendly?" Gosling repeated, his voice barely controlled. "You call spreading unsubstantiated rumors and attacking my professional reputation friendly?" The studio had gone dead silent. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut away from what was rapidly becoming a career-ending moment for someone. The only question was who would emerge destroyed. Kimmel's grin widened, revealing the predatory instincts that had made him successful in late-night television's cutthroat world. "Hey, I'm just doing my job here, Ryan. The audience wants to know about the real you, not just the carefully crafted image your publicists want us to see." "The real me?" Gosling's voice rose slightly, the first crack in his composed facade. "The real me is someone who's worked in this industry for over 2 decades without a single credible complaint about my conduct. The real me doesn't ambush guests with fabricated stories designed to destroy their reputation for cheap ratings." The audience began to stir uncomfortably. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a public execution disguised as an interview. But Kimmel was feeding off the tension, his eyes gleaming with the kind of malicious joy that comes from watching someone squirm. "Fabricated?" Kimmel laughed again, that same harsh sound that seemed to echo off the studio walls. "That's a strong word, Ryan. Are you saying these crew members are lying? That these industry professionals have nothing better to do than make up stories about Ryan Gosling?" Gosling leaned forward in his chair, his hands gripping the armrests so tightly his knuckles had gone white. "I'm saying that unnamed sources spreading gossip through tabloids are hardly credible witnesses. And I'm saying that a professional host would verify information before broadcasting accusations to millions of viewers." "Accusations?" Kimmel feigned shock, placing a hand over his heart in mock surprise. "I haven't accused you of anything. I'm simply sharing what people in your industry are saying. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourself why." The calculated cruelty of the response hit its mark. Gosling's jaw clenched, and for a moment everyone in the studio held their breath. The tension was so thick it felt suffocating, and the cameras captured every micro-expression on both men's faces. "What makes me uncomfortable," Gosling said slowly, each word precisely enunciated, "is sitting across from someone who's clearly decided to destroy a guest's reputation for entertainment value. What makes me uncomfortable is realizing that this entire interview was planned as an ambush from the moment I walked through that door." Kimmel's mask slipped for just an instant, revealing something ugly underneath before snapping back into place. "Now you're being paranoid, Ryan. This is just good television. The audience loves a little controversy, don't you?" He turned to the crowd, trying to rally them to his side, but the response was muted and uncomfortable. "Good television?" Gosling's voice was deadly quiet now, and somehow that was more threatening than if he had shouted. "Good television doesn't involve character assassination. Good television doesn't involve spreading lies to tear down someone who came here in good faith." The host's producer was frantically signaling from off-stage, drawing a finger across his throat in the universal cut sign, but Kimmel ignored him completely. He was too invested in the destruction now, too addicted to the rush of power that came from holding someone's reputation hostage on live television. "You keep saying lies," Kimmel pressed, his voice taking on a sing-song quality that made him sound almost deranged. "But you haven't actually denied any of the specific allegations. Interesting choice of words from someone who's supposedly innocent." That was the final straw. Gosling stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound that seemed to cut through the stunned silence like a blade. The sudden movement caused several audience members to gasp, and the camera operators instinctively zoomed in to capture every detail of what was clearly about to become television history. "This interview is over," Gosling announced, his voice carrying clearly through the studio despite its controlled volume. He began unhooking his microphone with sharp, angry movements that spoke louder than any shouting match could have. But Kimmel wasn't finished. As Gosling fumbled with the mic pack, the host leaned forward with one final, calculated blow. "Running away, Ryan. That's exactly what someone with something to hide would do." I guess the audience knows what that means. The words hit the studio like a physical force. Gosling froze, his hands still on the microphone equipment, and slowly turned back to face Kimmel. The look in his eyes was something none of the veteran crew members had ever seen before. A cold, focused fury that made everyone in the vicinity take an involuntary step backward. "You want to know what running away looks like?" Gosling's voice was ice-cold, each word delivered with surgical precision. "Running away is hiding behind a desk while you destroy people's lives for ratings. Running away is attacking someone when they can't fight back because the cameras are rolling and you control the edit." He dropped the microphone equipment, letting it clatter to the floor with a sharp electronic feedback that made everyone wince. The sound seemed to snap something in the studio's atmosphere, and suddenly Gosling was advancing on Kimmel's desk with purpose. "But you know what? I'm not running anywhere." Gosling planted both hands on the desk and leaned forward until he was inches from Kimmel's face. "You want good television? Let me give you some truth for your audience." Kimmel tried to maintain his smug expression, but there was genuine fear creeping into his eyes now. This wasn't going according to his script, and for the first time in the confrontation, he was the one who looked trapped. "Jimmy Kimmel, everyone," Gosling announced, turning slightly toward the cameras while keeping his eyes locked on the host. "A man so desperate for relevance that he's willing to destroy careers based on tabloid gossip. A host so insecure about his own mediocrity that he has to tear down people who actually create something meaningful." The audience was completely silent now, mesmerized by the raw intensity of the moment. Even the production crew had stopped pretending to work, all eyes fixed on the unprecedented scene unfolding before them. "You think you're untouchable because you have this platform," Gosling continued, his voice gaining strength and conviction. "But let me tell you something about platforms. They only work if people respect the person standing on them. And after tonight, after this pathetic display of journalistic cowardice, nobody's going to respect you." Kimmel tried to interject, but Gosling cut him off with a look that could have melted steel. "I came here to talk about art, about storytelling, about something that matters. Instead, you decided to drag me through the mud based on anonymous sources and fabricated drama. That says everything about who you are as a person, and nothing about who I am." He straightened up, adjusting his jacket with deliberate calm, transforming from the trapped guest back into the composed professional who had walked onto the stage an hour earlier. But now there was steel in his bearing, a dignity that made Kimmel look small and petty by comparison. "You want to know the real story, Jimmy? The real story is that you just ended your own career on live television. Because everyone watching this, your audience, your network executives, your advertisers, they all just saw exactly what kind of person you really are." With that, Gosling turned his back on Kimmel and began walking toward the exit. The cameras followed him, capturing every step of his dignified departure. As he reached the edge of the stage, he paused and looked back one final time. "Oh, and Jimmy? Next time you want to ambush someone, make sure you're not the one who ends up looking like the villain." The exit was perfect. No stumbling, no hurried escape, just a measured walk that somehow managed to convey both contempt and pity for the man he was leaving behind. The studio doors closed behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo through the stunned silence. Kimmel sat frozen at his desk, his face pale and his usual bravado completely evaporated. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or sit in shocked silence, creating an awkward murmur that filled the dead air. His production team was frantically signaling to cut to commercial, but the damage was already done. Within minutes of Gosling's exit, social media exploded with clips of the confrontation. "Respect Ryan Gosling" began trending worldwide, while Kimmel Ambush drew widespread condemnation from industry professionals and fans alike. The consensus was swift and brutal. Kimmel had crossed every line of professional conduct and been thoroughly dismantled by his intended victim. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Advertisers began pulling their sponsorship within hours, unwilling to be associated with Kimmel's reputation for character assassination. Network executives, already nervous about declining ratings, saw the writing on the wall. The entertainment industry, which had watched one of their own be publicly humiliated for sport, closed ranks against Kimmel with unprecedented unity. By the end of the week, Jimmy Kimmel's show was facing cancellation, his reputation in ruins, his legacy forever tainted by the night he tried to destroy Ryan Gosling and ended up destroying himself instead. The confrontation had indeed highlighted the importance of respect and professionalism in entertainment, by showing exactly what happens when those values are abandoned for cheap ratings and cruel spectacle.